Hello, 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 and welcome to the 7th episode of Mixed Media Reviews Season 5. My name is Kelsey, and today I'm going to be talking about a book. Well, a series, a book series. Well, maybe kind of two series. This week, we're going to be talking about the Zodiac Academy series, and a little bit of the Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. Okay, so I'd heard about these books quite a bit. At first, I got them confused with another book called Zodiac that's been on my physical TBR shelf for a very long time, that I got at Comic-Con many moons ago. And at first I thought it was that, and it became a series, but then I realized, no, it's something definitely different. I realized they were like Fae books, and I was still thinking that it was an older series, but I think it really came out like in 2020, I think. But I had heard that it was spicy, so I stayed away from them. But then Tara started making me read spicy books, and now that's apparently what my life is about. So I figured I'd finally check them out, but it had 9 books. So I decided to start with the prequel series that only had 5 books instead. That's The Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac, which is way spicier than I anticipated. But it was, I read them. So today's episode is going to be very spoiler heavy. And it's going to contain spoilers for both the Zodiac Academy series and the Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac series. There's another series out, what's it called? Something Darkmoor Penitentiary or something like that. I have not read those, so there won't be any spoilers for that one. So let me give you a quick summary. They're not really quick, they're actually kind of long. But I'll give you a summary about the first books of each series. So for Ruthless Boys, the first book in the series is Dark Fae, and this is the Amazon blurb for it. What do a heartless dragon shifter, a cold-blooded basilisk, an arrogant lion shifter, and a brooding tattooed harpy have in common? Me, Elise Callisto, vampire, angel of vengeance, and a girl on a mission to destroy one of them for murdering my brother. I just don't know which one did it yet. When I interrogated / accidentally killed a werewolf who is high on a new and dangerous drug called Killblaze, his final words painted a dark reality for me. The king of Aurora Academy killed my brother. The trouble is, there's 4 kings at the academy, and each of them have motive and bloodthirsty natures. Aurora Academy isn't a place for the faint of heart. To put it lightly, my town is the cesspit of Solaria, where the most cutthroat fae in the kingdom reside. The school itself is divided by the 2 gangs who run this city, the Lunar Brotherhood and the Oscura clan. And guess what? 2 of the kings run the gangs at the academy. Their hatred for each other so fierce, I hear a day doesn't go by without blood being spilled in the halls. I might be a petite, lilac-haired girl who looks like I couldn't hurt a fly, but they haven't been introduced to my fangs yet, and they don't know why I'm really here, or that I'll do whatever it takes to bring down the fae who took my flesh and blood from me. I don't believe in fate, but I do know this. The king who killed my brother is a dead man walking, and I'm prepared to sacrifice my heart, body, and soul to ensure I get my revenge. So it's a very long summary, and then there's a little bit of a blurb, a tidbit afterward that says, this is a gritty, college-age, steamy series set in a world where fae fight to take whatever they want. The heroine will end up with multiple love interests, so you never have to pick a favorite alpha hole. You can expect dark and hot romance and a twisted murder mystery which will leave your head spinning and your heart racing. This is a series set in the same world as Zodiac Academy, but it's its own story and can be read independently. So obviously I never read any of this before diving in, because I didn't really know anything about the book. And then the first book in the Zodiac Academy is The Awakening, and to be super honest, I don't know the titles of really any of these books. I think that's part of the trouble about reading them on my Kindle is it's really hard for me to remember the titles of my Kindle books because I'm not constantly looking at the titles like I am my physical book or even like the audiobooks. But it's even worse for these because there's so many and they just blend together. But yeah, so the Amazon blurb for the Zodiac Academy is the following. I'm a Gemini, impulsive, curious, headstrong, a twin, heir to a throne I know nothing about, and it turns out I'm Fae. But of course there's a catch. All I have to do to claim my birthright is prove that I'm the most powerful supernatural in the whole of Solaria. And sure, technically that's true as I'm the daughter of the Savage King, but the bit they didn't put in the brochure was that every single fae in this kingdom would claim my throne if they could. The school they've sent me to is both dangerous as crap and one heck of a party. Vampires bite weaker students in the corridors, the werewolf pack has orgies in the Wailing Wood at every full moon, and don't even get me started on the dark and twisted ways the sirens use their powers on people's emotions, or how my sinfully tempting cardinal magic teacher hosts detentions that leave people needing therapy. So this is apparently Darcy's point of view. Classes are totally interesting if you manage to live through them, and that Gemini star sign I mentioned, it now determines my elemental magic and affects my destiny. So learning astrology is essential if I'm going to beat down my classmates, which is actively encouraged, by the way. My biggest problem is a drool-worthy... Oh, okay, now we're back to Tori. My biggest problem is a drool-worthy dragon shifter who has his eyes on my throne. He and his 3 psycho friends are determined to make my time their heck. All I've got to do is survive, but fate might have other ideas. Darn it, why couldn't I have gotten a letter to Hogwarts? And then the extra little blurb thing is, this is an enemies to lovers romantasy. Don't go expecting a sweet school for magic with friends around every corner. Fae fight for everything they own, and Zodiac Academy is a cutthroat school for students age 18 plus where only the strongest prevail. There's no Dumbledore here to save anyone's butt, and Lionel Acrex will give Voldemort a run for his money in the evil dictator category. So hold on to your Stardust, broomsticks not required, and get ready for a bumpy ride. And that's it. That's the 2 summaries. So yes, let's dive in. What did I like about this series? Well, I liked the world. I thought it was an interesting take on Fae life, especially since that's been a very popular genre at the moment. I liked that there were kind of all kinds of different shifters in this world. There's, dragons, wolves, harpies, lions, vampires, and so many more. We've got magic. It's got some kind of dark academia vibes to it. They're, in college, or like a college type of class. After their regular schooling, they do magic schooling. And I thought that was just kind of an interesting take on the Fae genre, especially since it's not they're all technically Fae, but it's not like the elf Fae that we're perhaps more accustomed to. I also really liked in the Ruthless Boys series the murder mystery. It was intriguing, and it was definitely like, I don't know. It took a while to get there, but I did like the murder mystery aspect of it. In Zodiac Academy, I like the political aspects of the series. That the fact that they're trying to fight for this throne, that there's the counselors that exist now, and Lionel Acrex, him kind of vying for the throne and orchestrating everything for him to kind of get into that position. And then the heirs are kind of the next generation. And then, of course, the twins trying to prove themselves worthy of the throne. What else? So I thought Ruthless Boys had a lot more likable characters. There some people, I think, have a problem with Elise, but I didn't necessarily have that big of a problem with her. But the 4 kind of love interest guys are all fairly likable, I would say. Nothing too terrible about them. While Zodiac Academy certainly had a lot of characters that took a while for us to really like them and to kind of, pull our way, including the love interests. Like Darius was hard to, kind of root for when he was such a butthead. Same thing with Seth. So a little different dynamic. And I'll say that while the Ruthless Boys did drag out a bit, like I was saying, it took a while to get to the murder mystery bits at times. I thought it was still a fairly good pace the entire time. I mean, it's the reverse harem thing, so she's got like 4 love interests, so of course that's going to take a big chunk out of time for the novels. This certainly probably could have been, a 3-story arc, and not the full 5. I'm sure they could have cut a bunch out, but overall it didn't drag so much, probably because there were still only 5, that I was like struggling to really get through it, so that was good. We'll talk about Zodiac, but yes, we'll talk more. But briefly, the first 5, maybe 6 books of Zodiac Academy was okay. Getting into book 6, perhaps. Definitely 7 was a little bit rough to get through. 8 was, oh my God, so hard to get through. And by book 9, I barely even cared. In fact, I had to listen to book 9, so I wouldn't have to sit and read it all by myself. And I could listen to it while I was doing other things, and I could, make it double the speed at times. And even when I did pick up towards the end of book 9, I did find it myself slowing it down a little bit, but it was still like, I just want to get this over with. But the first, I would say probably 5 books had a fairly decent kind of flow to them. What else? So I also, I want to note, that I read the Ruthless Boys books first, as I was like, it's less books, like I was saying, so I'll see how that goes. It made sense at the time, I promise. But I believe the suggested order is to read them after book 3. But I would highly recommend reading them either all up front or after book 3 and not wait until the end, as some people have, because I think knowing the story of all those characters was helpful, and, the Easter eggy aspects of the Zodiac books, use of those characters definitely made me resonate with them more, because I was like, oh, it's so-and-so, and, like, it was nice to be like, oh, that's what Leon or Dante's up to, or whatever. And it made me care a lot more about Gabriel than I might have if I hadn't read about his story first, and, been more intrigued about who his parents were and all that kind of stuff. So definitely recommend reading those books either first or after that 3rd book, when I think that's when Gabriel was first kind of introduced in Zodiac Academy. So I would do that, because otherwise you probably won't really care about those characters very much. And that might be it. I will say that the books did draw me in, and then, because it's hard for me to let things go, I had to finish the series. Again, I like the plot and the overall ideas. I was trying to read these, as you know, they're real romantasy, not trying to judge them against another genre that I may hold to a higher standard, but at the same time, why can't romantasy be held to that standard? So we should definitely talk about the issues I had with it. But yes, I did maybe overall enjoy the last couple books. Definitely made it difficult for me to just say that I enjoyed the series and it was whatever, don't read too much into it. And it was fine, because, oh God, they really dragged it out. So yes, let's dive into what I didn't like, and we'll ignore my dog barking in the background because she is a butthead. So, critiques and things I wasn't a fan of. First, I kind of took a little bit of notes during the Ruthless Boys, but they were super vague, and I don't think I took any notes during Zodiac Academy. But I'm just going to read the first note that I took during the Ruthless Boys read during Dark Fae, and it just says concrete, ! Yes, ! But no Oxford comma. Also British, but also not. So yes, they said concrete when they meant concrete and not cement. So I was stoked for that. But then they didn't use Oxford commas, so it really just canceled itself out. And I was, not as excited. I love Oxford commas. That's it. So the authors Peckham and Valenti, who are sisters, are British. But then I guess to appeal to people or something, they had the main characters of Zodiac Academy, Darcy and Tori, come from like Chicago. But they didn't speak like Americans. So while reading the Ruthless Boys books, I was just confused because there were a lot of American and British slang and terminology, so I didn't really know what they were supposed to be, but figured, I guess it's Fae, so who cares if they borrow a little bit of each American and British slang. It's not a real place, right? But then I started Zodiac Academy, and it was, more relevant that it was confusing because they didn't, So they didn't take a lot of time in Ruthless Boys to explain things, and I guess they were assuming people would read like Zodiac first anyway, even though I just read in that blurb that said it was a standalone story. So now during Zodiac Academy, when I was reading that, I was realizing that it was just all smashed together, even though two of the characters were supposedly American, and they used a lot of British slang. Like, if it was them versus the Fae using the British slang, okay, maybe, but the American girls shouldn't have been using that same kind of style of speaking and everything, and so it was very confusing. And yes, so going back for a second, I'll say again that it's a bit annoying that they didn't really explain the world in Ruthless Boys, because even if they assumed you'd already read a Zodiac Academy, they still should have, taken some time to explain some things. I was very confused for quite a bit of it to understand what was actually happening, because they didn't take that time to kind of give us a bit of the backstory or world building. They just threw us in. Especially since they refused to write any, spoilers into Zodiac Academy about Ruthless Boys. That I feel like proves the point that they wanted to try to keep them separate and not spoil one over the other. And building off of that, while it was fun at first for the authors to hint about the characters from Ruthless Boys, it made no sense the further we got into the series that Elise wasn't more present in the story, and that they kept hinting about Gabriel's family and Dante's family and like Leon's family and stuff like that, but they wouldn't just come out and say it, that they're all one family. And it felt so out of character that Elise would not be as present with Gabriel's sisters, and that the sisters wouldn't just flat out refer to Dante or Leon as Gabriel's husbands-in-law, or whatever terminology that we know for a fact Leon would be using. And that Leon himself wasn't constantly going on about it, as he did in the Ruthless Boys series. I think it would only make sense, I suppose, that Carson wasn't really as obvious, to use that as like the thing that they didn't really go into full detail, so that perhaps you didn't quite spoil that, because obviously in Ruthless Boys they're all going to end up as mates. Like, it's a romantasy. Of course that's where the story's going. It's not really like a huge spoiler, but I could definitely see trying to hide Carson as the spoiler. And then we could get, kind of the inside joke / Easter egg thrill from his character, being around, doing the tattoo and the piercing, rather than, with the entire cast. Because again, that's not really a spoiler that they end up together. Of course they do. And because I really, really had to power through book 8, I did the tandem read with Beyond the Veil, which is one of their mini, little short story things that they have written along the side. And it was to help with just how super depressing book 8 was, that it was such a slog to get through. But even in Beyond the Veil, we didn't get like any mention of Elise's brother. I kept waiting for him to pop up to also be invested in everything that was happening, but he never did. Like, I was already annoyed in the Ruthless Boys that he was legit dead, but then we didn't even get him back for the Afterlife book. I felt like that was pretty lame and missing out quite a bit, all in the sake of, trying not to spoil the ending to Ruthless Boys. We should have gotten some of him, especially in this little novella thing that's not really, the full series. We could have at least popped in a little bit. So yeah, that annoyed me quite a bit. And while we kind of brought up Carson recently, let's talk about Ryder in Ruthless Boys. Obviously, spoiler. I hated how his character ended up. Again, big spoilers today, but we get Ryder, who could, never be himself freely without fear of losing his place, of being in charge of the gang, who is, dealt this terrible hand of life without family and love, and all for him to end up having to fake his death at the end and pretend to be someone he wasn't still. So he could never just be himself. He couldn't be himself when he was in the gang. He couldn't be himself when he was mated to Elise. He just could never be himself. He couldn't be Ryder. And now he has to live a complete lie as Carson, including his face is the face of somebody else. So he can't even look like who he was. Every part of him is now a lie. So the poor guy got the worst of this entire series, both series, I would say. And I get that this is dark romantasy, so there's going to be some dark themes and stuff, but like, he can't even have a happy ending. Like, they just gloss over that so much, that this guy could never be himself, and like it's not like it was even really his choice to be like, you know what, I want to be somebody else, I'm reinventing myself. And I didn't really get the feeling that it was like he embraced the ability to be somebody else and whatever, because he had no other choice, right? He was forced to do this. So none of this was a choice of his to make, and he's stuck with being somebody that's not himself, and he can never truly show the world who Ryder actually was and is. And it's just so freaking sad. Like, that's just his life now. It's so messed up. But also, like, Elise became kind of famous for having 4 Elysian mates, right? We find out the aunt or whatever, Caleb's mom, she finds out that she's like mated to these guys, and they put it in the paper, and it becomes this whole thing. So everybody knows she has 4 Elysian mates, right? And then one of them dies, who's also kind of famous, being, a leader of the gang. And then the remaining group of 3 plus Elise just start hanging out with this other dude, Carson, randomly, and no one is like, wait, this non-Elysian mate guy is also dating her, even though, within this fantasy realm, no one who's mated would ever really want to be with anybody else. So I don't think, even within the world where she's mated to 3 dudes, would she want to somehow also date somebody else, and would they want to share her with someone who she's not mated to? I don't know, but you'd think that they'd piece together that maybe Ryder faked his death, and that this Carson is really him. It's a bit odd. Like, did Elise even really mourn her dead mate? You'd think that she'd take a lot of time to get over a dead mate, because that's also a big deal, and not just immediately jump, Leon's cousin, who they say Carson is, and then also pull your partner's cousin into your relationship. And now that I'm thinking about it, now you're dating 2 cousins? That's really gross. So I don't like, the whole thing is really weird, but also just, I feel so bad for Ryder for never being able to be his true self. And like, the Zodiac books, have Darius's brother, Xavier, who, like, the whole thing for him is that, him trying to be happy with who he is, even though his father is not happy who he is and what he is. And, the acceptance of Xavier through his brother and his friends, and everybody else in his life, and his mother. And, that whole journey for Xavier was very touching and, thoughtful. I guess it was great to see that he was becoming fully embraced by everybody around him, for being his true self, for being the Pegasus and not a dragon, and him doing well and succeeding and becoming the leader of his herd, and in his little throuple relationship, and him doing well and thriving despite the fact that he was so ashamed of who he was in the beginning of Zodiac Academy. And yet we have Ryder, who never really got that full circle arc either. Like, he's had that same thing where he couldn't really be who he was, and his gang would never really accept him, and that's why he felt like he couldn't eat sweets. He couldn't do a lot of things because the gang would never accept him if he wasn't always constantly this tough man. And yet he never got to experience, like, just being able to be himself. Like, yes, it could have been outside of the gang. Maybe he wasn't fully accepted, but as long as he was fully accepted by everybody else. But he still was never really that, because he never got to be Ryder. He had to then become Carson. I don't know. I just feel like it sucks. And I'm really mad. I'm still really mad about it, even though I finished those books forever ago, because he deserves happiness as Ryder, not just as Carson. But yeah, moving on. So the writing of both series isn't super great. Both, like, the actual words on the page, and also the way that they handled things, like, with Carson, obviously. But, like, also in Ruthless Boys, we get this introduction to Rosa, who's Dante's cousin. And she's like, 13, 14 in the books at this time. And yet when Peckham and Valenti write about her, they do it in such a weird way. There were a couple of moments, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember the way that they were describing her like body was really like over sexualizing this like young teenager. And it made me very uncomfortable because I was like, she's like a young teen, 13, 14 years old, maybe 14 at the point where they're like describing her body or something like that. And it was just a weird way to describe a young teenager. And I'm not quite sure how old the sisters are. Looking at their pictures, they could be in their 30s. I feel like they could perhaps be my age-ish. So I would think, that they would understand that it's weird, and know that it's weird to describe a 13, 14-year-old girl in the way that they did. But I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but it weirded me out. But also, like, the whole Darcy and Orion thing, I get that they're college age, right? So it's not the creepiest, but they're still 18, the girls, the twins. And if I'm understanding, like, I get the mate thing of it, that even though Orion did try to stay away because he recognized she was young and also a student, that the mate thing didn't really let him, like, get over his feelings, and he still felt that strong pull to her, and that's why eventually, everybody accepted them because they became mated, and it was like, oh, well, then I guess it was fine. Doesn't matter anymore, because in this realm, it's looked down upon still because, that's his teacher, or the teacher in the student relationship is not okay, even though they are 18, right? And in Ruthless Boys, when we found that out about the teacher, that, with Ryder, or she was not a teacher, she was the siren lady, the therapist. And so, like, that was super frowned upon, and she got power shamed and blah, blah, blah. And the same kind of happened to Orion, and obviously it's slightly different situations, I suppose. But it still felt like, and they were still trying to kind of like glorify it. And it's, okay, so let me say that it made me really uncomfortable how they would use that relationship to kind of, how do I say this in PG terms? So like they would, I can't even, guys. Okay, I'm just gonna read what I wrote, and we'll see how I feel. They write Orion really creepily. Like, it's okay to be into the type of relationship with the whole punishment thing going on, if that's your cup of tea, whatever, not shaming. But it's weird when they're inserting it into a couple's relationship who already has that kind of power dynamic over them. Like, he's already the professor and she's the student, and they really play that up constantly. Like, the video that, that got them caught when they were down there, like, it was really heavily into the thing, and that's why they were able to, like, use that to be like, look, you were manipulating her, because of the creepy talk that you guys had during the whole situation. And it felt like that didn't really need to happen, if you wanted to make it seem like, you're not trying to take advantage of the fact that he's the teacher, even though they're constantly making it obvious that she's young and he's older. Like, he's, I think, 26 or so when the books first start, and she's 18. And it really just felt like that role of, I'm older and wiser and your teacher and you don't know anything and I have to teach you everything, just kept being utilized and played up. And it made me feel uncomfortable because it felt like they were trying to, mimic a high school student and teacher kind of relationship. And it just, I don't know, it made me feel a bit icky. We'll say that. And again, you'd think that ladies who were older would understand that the student-teacher relationship is a bit creepy, especially when that student is, only 18. Like, in Pretty Little Liars, when I watched it when I was younger, I didn't think anything of Arya and Ezra. But then I grew up and I was like, how are adults writing this and making it seem like Arya and Ezra are endgame. Like, yes, I thought that when I was younger, but then I grew up and realized, no, that's a really creepy age difference, especially since he's the teacher. And then especially more as the series went on, and spoilers for Pretty Little Liars, but we find out that he knew exactly who she was when they first met in that bar and how old she actually was. And I may be misremembering this because this was another series I tortured myself to watch to the end. But I think that there's a time we find out that Ezra also dated Allison too, or like was flirty with her or did something. And she was also even younger at that point. So super creepy, but it's gross. And grown adults should not be advocating that. And yes, this is a bit of a different situation because they're not in high school and not much younger. But, you know, in Zodiac Academy, that's still frowned upon in this world. But it's even more gross when they continue to play up the whole teacher-student relationship in their sex life, you know? I didn't like it. But yes, so those are like two examples of situations that I felt like they didn't quite write very well. But also I just felt like the books really needed to be edited by others. We know Sarah J. Maas could really use an editor as well, and these girls also prove that having an editor is super important and super vital, because you can get really into your own writing and it'd be hard to have kind of an objective mind about it, and I completely understand that, and I get that. I get that you don't want to cut anything, that everything you put in you feel like is super important. But I feel like having an editor could have helped pick up, you know, maybe some of those creepy vibes I mentioned, but also just the writing as well. They needed to be polished. An editor could have helped with, you know, that blend of American British terminology that they perhaps weren't really aware of. But also with just getting it to feel like they weren't just typing everything that popped into their head and then never going back to reread it. The books are written from multiple point of views, and it felt like we kept hearing the same things over and over and over again. Like, not only were the constanters constantly repeating information to where I'm like, yes, they already said that, or like it's been a paragraph of them saying the same thing slightly different over and over again. I could have, you know, helped and pared down, but they also kept using the same like phrases and verbiage for multiple characters. I can't remember exactly how they said it, but they kept saying something about like there's like a 3% chance or something really weird, like a weird way of saying, you know, there's a chance for whatever, but it was like a very specific number, and they kept using that number over and over again with different characters saying it. And so like it didn't feel like they were necessarily different characters with different voices. It was just one voice that was, you know, and it's all first person, so it was all just one voice in every single person. Like they were pumping these books out like crazy for sure. And the later books of Zodiac Academy, I think, really highlight that. The books started to feel dragged out as well. Like the last two books could have easily been one book, and we probably could have shortened some of the other ones as well. Like a lot needed to be cut out and condensed, and because they just did not hold my attention, because they kept repeating, like I'm repeating right now. They kept repeating things. They kept dragging things out. Everything just seemed like they were really just trying to twist the knife in. And book 8 was just so depressing when it didn't really need to be this long and terrible thing. Like making the sisters go so one of the points that I really hated was when Darcy and Orion were being held at the palace, and Tori comes in to save them, and Tori's like, let me get you out of here, Darcy, and she's like feeling really alone because Darius is dead, and she's like, Darcy, let me take you home, take Orion, and she's like, no, we can't take Orion because then he's gonna die because he's in this death vow thing, and she's like, but I have to stay and protect him because without me, like, he'll just die, and Tori's like, but like, you're choosing him over me. But she's like, also, I turn into a shadow beast, and I can't control the shadow beast thing. So, like, I can't do this. I can't go anywhere. So then she knocks her sister out thinking, oh, well, when you're unconscious, that'll help you control the shadow beast. But of course it undoes, like, lets her loose, and she's still like upset with her sister. And I just felt like this is unnecessary, like, angst. Of course Darcy didn't want to go and leave her own mate. Yes, her sister means a lot to her, but like, it's her own mate as well. But also, on top of that, it's literally, she murdered a bunch of people on the battlefield, and she didn't want to do that again. And for her sister to just be like, what you want doesn't matter because I'm hurting and I need you, is kind of messed up. And but there were like plenty of things that were happening that were just over the top, and like it was just prolonging like the longest fight. And like, I get you don't want to make it seem too easy, but like it lasted forever. And then the one part that you think, okay, this one won't drag out because we've really been driving home that defeating Lionel is really difficult and it's taking a lot of effort. But Lionel's final like defeat and death was like 2 seconds long. Like the whole battle before it took forever, like a whole book. And when they finally face Lionel in the tunnels, his death is over, like, it's like the fastest death in the entire series. So like, we had all of this drama and lead up to attacking Lionel, and there was no fight. They just killed him. And it was like, okay, whatever. Another thing that took way too long was for the heirs to finally bend the knee. Like, it took Darius dying and coming back to finally bend the knee. And I get why at first, obviously, but in the middle of the series, when they're openly admitting that the girls are the most powerful, but they're still, like, they can't have the throne, as if they think they'll just get the throne and wouldn't let the heirs be a part of it, even though they're literally, like, bonded and friends, and one of them's mated to the other. Like, I was just really confused because the counselors still worked with Hale Vega when he was king. So why wouldn't they still have that role to play when the sisters took the throne? And not like a single person mentioned that as a possibility throughout the entire series. And it just blew my mind that no one brought that up, like even the sisters. And yes, I get that the heirs were heavily ingrained in Fae society, so they were, you know, basically told from a very small young age that all they need to do is to fight for the throne or fight for that power, you know. And that it was going to be very hard for them to finally accept Darcy and Tori as the rightful rulers, but it took way too long for them to finally do so. Even when they were very obviously, like, they kept being like, no, they're not, you know, they're not good enough, they don't know everything. Well, then why don't you propose that you guys share it? Like, it annoyed me that wasn't even like something that somebody brought up, and then it was shot down for whatever reason, you know, like it was just never even brought up. And then speaking of Darcy and Tori being really powerful, another thing that annoyed me was that I felt like Tori got the coolest like power scenes while Darcy didn't get like anything. Tori was the one who saved the heirs after the battle. She was the one who, like, when they're all like chained up or whatever with like their family members, and she was also the one who fought like crazy to get Darius back from the dead and did all kinds of crazy things. And then during like all of this, Darcy's just like a slave to that shadow beast. So like, didn't feel like she got a lot of cool things. Like, she got like a moment or two when she fought Lavinia, but it just didn't feel like it was on par with Tori. Like, Tori saving the heirs in that scene, she got like this nice holy crap moment from the other counselors who finally got a taste of how powerful she was. But I felt like Darcy never really had that moment to really shine and show just how powerful she was. And yeah, super annoying. So I feel like there were a lot of things that having an editor could have helped with their writing, with some of these pacing things, some of these issues that were just like, I don't know. Like, if they had condensed a lot of it, then I think a lot of these things wouldn't have been as prominent. But I don't know. It was a little rough to read, for sure. So in Ruthless Boys, I think this was even more obvious, but applies to Zodiac Academy as well. Understanding that this is dark romantasy, Okay. I still wanted more variation in the spice that we saw or read. But it seemed like every single character had the same exact, shall we say, style of spice. And it's especially apparent in Ruthless Boys because she talks about how she's kind of become this fractured into different pieces person after her brother's death. And she just feels like each of the guys kind of speak to her in a different way, and like a different part of her that's kind of been fractured and broken. And yet they all end up speaking the same exact language in the bedroom department. And that same language was seen all in the guys in Zodiac Academy. Well, they can explain it away by saying it's like a fae thing because they're all about power and blah, 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 blah. It just made for really boring, spicy scenes. Like, because they all went the exact same. Like, there's always that power play and that, like, roughness. And it was just like, okay, we've seen it. You know? And really this could probably be said across a lot of romantasy in general, because so much of it is this exact same style of spice. And I would just prefer more variety. Just break it up. Have some guys truly be different. And instead of like, even though they're the sweet guy, they're still monsters in a bedroom or whatever, you know? Like, give me some variety, okay? Because they don't all have to be bossy dudes telling you what to do. Anyway, and I get that every series does not need to be a super deep and rewarding one. I've said it before, and I even said it last week when I reviewed Merry Gentlemen, the movie. And I'm sure the sisters had, a ton of fun writing the series, and I'm very happy for them. Even though I could never write that level of detail in those spicy scenes with my sister, or knowing that she was actively also writing the same types of scenes. I don't know. But yeah, I'm sure they had a blast reading it or writing them, and, really enjoying the, going back and forth and whatever their style of writing was. And obviously it's done very well for them. It's very popular and like good for them. I'm glad that they had the fun of writing him. But I just feel like if they had an editor to help them kind of sort through their thoughts and help them, again, kind of polish off that language, then these books could have been really good. Something that could have really shined and stood out, because it is a very interesting world, and it is a very interesting, kind of take on the Fae and how they live their lives. And I, again, like the kind of that political aspect of it. It kind of felt a bit more like a true fantasy because it had a lot of that political kind of world building to it. But I know I've been a bit of a romantasy kick lately, but I really wish we got more solid writing in this genre in general. Where we got, more solid world building, since I still don't actually understand how the magic system works in Zodiac Academy, because they never went into detail. Like, all I know is they apparently have to use their hands, because if their hands are encased in ice or something, they can't perform magic. But like, I want more. I want more in this genre. And I never thought I'd say this, but I want a spicy scene within a solid, well thought out magical world. Give me layered characters and fine-tuned prose, while also having a romance that fuels my desire to race to the end of the book. I want all of that. I don't want to have to keep reading these books where I'm like, well, they tried. If you don't think super hard, it's fine. And, the writing could have been worse. I will give them that. It wasn't, god-awful writing. It was fairly decent. It just needed that extra push, I think, from, again, an editor to help them really kind of pull it together. But I just give me some levels of, like, my latest 5-star read, which is that Blood Over Brighthaven book by M.L. Wong. But, with a heavy smattering of romance. I want it all, you guys. So if you have any romantasy recommendations that are, like, genuinely well written, and I might get some hate for this, but I feel like Fourth Wing was pretty there. And I don't actually have, like, I get that her writing gets a lot of crap because it's way more modernized. But I actually kind of enjoyed the fact that it was kind of modernized, and it was paired with this like fantasy realm, because who says that people can't speak, with a more modern lingo when there's dragons in the background? Why not, But yes, if you have any of those recommendations, please let me know, because I'm dying for well thought out, well built, worlds and realms and magic systems or scientific areas, or whatever. Like, give me, what is a row sci-fi? Row science? I don't know what probably, maybe it's because it's really hard to combine romance and science fiction, and maybe that's why that genre doesn't really exist yet. But give me that. I want all of that in a well-written, well-thought-out book. So yeah, this was super long. I'm very sorry. And I don't even know how I feel about the series, really, in the end. Because I think I generally liked them. I think I liked Ruthless Boys more than I liked Zodiac Academy, but that could literally just be because it's shorter. And I don't even think that I could really recommend the audiobooks to help get you through like the whole series faster, because the Geraldine chapters were enough to get me to almost quit the books. Like, hers were double the speed, 100%, and I couldn't really listen for very long because, oh my god, I could not listen to that voice. No offense. But I guess if you really just want something to read, go for it, I guess, because it's not short, it's not happy for the most part, and it's a little all over the place in everything. Maybe read book 1 and see how you feel, because I wouldn't say they get better. Maybe just read Ruthless Boys and see how you feel about that, because it's probably the same writing styles. It's just doesn't have as bad of pacing problems because they are shorter of a series. But again, you don't find out the fate of her brother and who like the evil guy is, which I actually immediately guessed. But you don't find out who that person is up until like book 5. So it is still a lot. And like I said, part of that is probably just because it's that reverse harem trope and there's a lot of dudes she needs to be with. So there's a lot. So I don't know. I don't know if I recommend it. Darkmoor Penitentiary, which is apparently 4 books. I think the 4th just came out this summer. And I think that's supposed to be the last book. So like, I almost want to read them because I'm like, well, they're only 4 books, but I don't even know if I can. I don't even know if I can. And I believe it's another reverse harem where Rosa will be getting with, Leon's older brother is one of the dudes who's also much older than her. So I guess the sisters just have a thing for large age gaps that may or not be weird, since Rory knew Rosa when she was like a young teen. I think she was like 13 when he was 24 or something, or maybe she was 14 when he was 24. I don't remember the exact timeline of the books. But that's quite the age difference, to then be like, oh yeah, I'm totally into you. Even though I think she's supposed to be 24 in the beginning of the Darkmoor Penitentiary books. There's also a large gap between time at the end of Zodiac Academy and the beginning of Darkmoor. But I'm also like, they're going to do the same thing with Darkmoor Penitentiary, where there's probably no spoilers from Zodiac Academy or Ruthless Boys. So what's the point of finishing out a series if you don't really get to know what everybody else is up to in the series? Because they won't just come out and say things. So I don't know. We'll see. maybe one day. Maybe if I'm really bored. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Zodiac Academy and the Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac by Catherine Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast. Please leave me a comment to let me know if you agreed with my take on the series, or if you have any other hot takes, or if you are a vigorous supporter and you think it's the perfect series. Or if you have any suggestions for me to read or watch in the future. You can find me anywhere you find your podcasts, probably. But using Spotify would be very helpful. Please join me next week, where I will be talking about some of my favorite TV show series finales. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.